So Bernie Sanders with a very solid victory tonight in New Hampshire. As the final numbers come in, it'll fluctuate a little bit, but early on here, it's about a 14-point lead he's got. And
17 right now.
Okay, up to 17. So it's fluctuated from as low as 12 up to 17, which is where we are as we're doing the show live here. Now, let's talk about the spin from New Hampshire, because let's keep it real. The number of delegates you get from a small state like New Hampshire is not likely to make the difference. The momentum you get going into the next states does make a large difference.
Yeah, there are 32 Democratic delegates here. I think there are 23 Republican delegates. So, and it'll probably break, and they apportion them basically toward the percentage there. So if it ends up like 58-42, Hillary will get 18 or 19, Bernie will get 18 or 19 delegates, and he'll be ahead, like 37-31.
Yeah.
Yes. So, earlier in the night we talked about how much free media matters in a presidential election, because money doesn't get to drown out your voice in a presidential election because there's so much media covering it anyway. So then that means the way that the media covers it is relevant. Mm-hmm. So if it turns out that it stays at the higher end of the parameters of the night so far, and it's a 17-point win, will the media say Bernie Sanders crushed Hillary Clinton in New Hampshire? Well, they should. 17 points is not a little. It's not 0.2%.
Yeah.
Not
it's
expecting that framing at all.
No, I actually, I've said this before, I think they will. On the first night, I think there will be feigned surprise, right?
And they'll be, decisive. There'll be a storyline about how New Hampshire, which had been so good to the Clintons twice, to Bill in 1992, giving him that unexpected second-place finish, which kept his campaign alive, and it worked out for him because he became president for 8 years.
Arguably.
But is the press really going to be surprised? They've seen these polls just as we've seen these polls.
It's just, but it's a different thing. Polls are one thing, voting is something else. So, and it will be a decisive, and they like the horse race, and so now it is very hard to make an argument on the Democratic side that the fight has not been joined. Like, she leads, by an average of 13 points nationally. There's no way it's going up after tonight. That'll tighten. There was already that one poll that had it at 2. My hunch is that there'll be an average of 5 polls in the next 10 days, and she'll be ahead by 6 or 7 points. It'll be close as we had it. So they like the horse race part. Then there'll start to be some dissection of Bernie Sanders, but and there'll be. But, there won't be negative ads yet. The negative ads will be what hurt him. The dissection of his, that helps him in many ways. People are like, oh, wow, well, he's honest and straightforward and thinks we should get money out of politics.
But that's the interesting thing. While the media continues to criticize his policies and attack him on what they think are non-progressive votes in the past, his supporters come out stronger, they support him more, and it actually ends up helping him.
In this one case, I think the analogy very often does not hold. But in this one case, he is a little similar to Trump in that the more they attack Trump, the more Republican voters like him. They're like, oh, no, he's against Mexicans. They're like, yeah, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
No, but you don't understand, he's against Muslims. They're like, oh, that sounds great, right? So in the Democratic primary side, when they attack Bernie Sanders and they go, no, you don't understand, though. He's really against Wall Street. And they're like, oh, okay, that sounds like our guy. No. Today the Wall Street Journal, with a comical editorial that was supposed to be scathing against Bernie Sanders, within the editorial, they say about how Wall Street is one of the glorious parts of our economy. Anybody reading that, especially if they're a Democratic voter, about how we should, celebrate the wonderful people that work on Wall Street, and how Bernie Sanders is being too mean to them, goes Sanders, right? So a lot of attention here. Now, if it had turned out that Bernie Sanders did not win with as large a margin as the polling indicated, he won by 5, then I suspect the media would have gone in the other direction and declared victory for Hillary Clinton. Yeah. Oh, Sanders only won by 5. He was expected to win by 13. Here comes Hillary, and New Hampshire was a neighboring state to Vermont. This doesn't count, and she's up by a lot in South Carolina. Yeah. This race is over. But that's not what happened. So that's a big deal that didn't happen.
A couple of important numbers. So it's difficult to say exactly, but in Iowa, he outperformed the polls by 3 to 5 points or so. Right now, it looks like he is probably outperforming the polls by at least a couple of points. Again, now a caucus is very different than a primary, but in both cases, he's up to 18 points now, I believe, over her.
Yeah, I mean,
About 18 points. Oh, really fast, a couple of interesting numbers. So Rand Paul had 1/3 as many votes as Ben Carson, which is pretty good since he's not in the race.
What? Really?
And there was also based on the exit polling, Republican turnout is up 8% over 2008. Democratic turnout is down 10% from 2008. Obviously, 2008 is you're replacing a Republican president. You would expect this sort of thing, but it is happening.
yeah, it's a bad sign for Democrats.
That's not a good sign, yeah.
The bad news is last polling I saw in South Carolina, Hillary Clinton had a 30-point lead.
Yes.
When did you see that?
And I think
Okay,
that's
recently, like yesterday.
I think that's pretty close to an average.
Yeah.
No, I'm
So-
looking up right here.
Yeah, and so Ben, if you remember, what's next? Because the Republicans and Democrats are not voting in the same state at the
Next,
same
a week
time.
from Saturday, the Democrats will caucus in Nevada, where Hillary is also ahead, but it's a caucus, so you don't know. But again, here's what we do know, and then the Republicans come back on Tuesday in South Carolina, and then the following Tuesday they switch, and the Republicans do their Nevada caucus, and the Democrats do South Carolina.
Okay. So there, for Bernie Sanders, Nevada's next. It's a caucus. If we are correct in reading these numbers and the normal, analysis of obviously seeing the excited crowds, et cetera, and it seems that more people are showing up for Bernie Sanders, and hence, to John's point, he's getting a couple points more than the polling would indicate. Well, then, maybe he's got a shot in Nevada of catching up to her, and that could actually be a big momentum shifter, because still people are going to say, hey, I don't know if New Hampshire counts because it's so close to his home state, and if she can, and the polling holds and she wins easily in Nevada and South Carolina, then all this excitement was for nothing. But if he winds up carrying that momentum into Nevada and wins, I think that definitely changes South Carolina. Not as in it changes it that he's going to win, but it makes it a much tighter race.
And anyway, like two things. Obviously, this is a neighboring state, and both these states with these Democratic voters, progressive and white, those are his, right now, that's unquestionably the basis of his constituency. Doesn't mean it can't expand. And nothing, the last poll in South Carolina, it was in the end of January. She was up by 37. Another one 22 in January. But the other polls are in December. Those are irrelevant. There have been results now, right?
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. Now they'll start to poll South Carolina. And I don't think anybody thinks that if you poll South Carolina after what Bernie Sanders wins here and ties in Iowa, that he won't be closer than 37 points. I think I would be stunned if that weren't at least cut in half, if not more. But Nevada, no matter where you go next, Nevada, and you would obviously right, if he does well, if he somehow pulls off a win there, she won the Nevada caucuses last time, I believe. But wherever we go, we're off his turf now. So any win that he has now, at least from sort of political punditry, will have to be seen as, oh, look, he's now won somewhere else. He's staked a claim somewhere else other than these two states, which were fairly ideally suited to Bernie Sanders.
Let me just do one last analysis of that before we go to Jordan at Bernie Sanders' headquarters in New Hampshire. If by, and I say some miracle because really, I mean, to erase a 30-point lead when they're going to vote in 2 weeks in South Carolina.
Well, 30-point lead, but they're voting in 2 weeks, but that last poll was in January, so
It's been several weeks, I guess.
So, okay,
Still
let's
hard to believe, but-
even in a month, if he erases that 30-point lead and he somehow wins in South Carolina, then it's over in the opposite direction.
right, because of course everything means something else. Like when you talk in the general election, when people talk about, oh, what if you win in Wisconsin? Well, if Democrats lose Wisconsin, well, if they lose Wisconsin, that means they probably lost Michigan and they probably lost Pennsylvania, and this is a pointless conversation.
Yeah, if Democrats lose Pennsylvania, they lost the election. So
Right.
we're not having that conversation.
So if Hillary Clinton loses South Carolina, then obviously much of that firewall on Super Tuesday is in significant jeopardy. And she could lose many of those states because those states are similar. Many of those states, not all, are similar to South Carolina. So that's going to cause such a, then we'll get all those stories, whether anyone does it, about, well, somebody, is Joe Biden coming? Is somebody going to step in here? But she's not that weak a candidate. She's just the strength. Bernie is an incredibly strong candidate, much stronger than people thought. So, what we're probably looking at on the Democratic side after the decisiveness of tonight's results, especially if Bernie shows up in Nevada and makes it close, right, is similar to what we had last time, which is a long campaign, which I think actually suits the Democrats just fine.
So,
And by the way, Super Tuesday is on March 1st. And after Super Tuesday, it's entirely possible that both primaries are totally over. Like, that's also possible.
Yeah, definitely
I mean,
possible.
Or it could be another 2008.
Yeah, but most primaries usually are over after Super Tuesday. And so especially, I mean, like, yeah, knockout punches could be delivered by Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, or Donald Trump. They cannot be delivered by anyone else.
Except for Jeb.
You see what I'm saying? Kasich somehow wins Super Tuesday, which would be amazing. It'll probably be very narrow lead, and Trump and others will still be in the race.
I do not see a scenario where Bernie Sanders delivers a knockout blow on Super Tuesday.
No, I'll tell you why I see that
so much
scenario.
money, I mean.
Because if he's really, again, it's a huge, huge if. We're not there anywhere near there yet. But if he's peaking and he wins Super Tuesday, I mean, what has she got left?
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
So the New York Times is reporting that Hillary Clinton lost to Bernie Sanders in almost every demographic except for one. Guess what that demographic was?
Older women.
No.
Prisoners.
Those making
1%.
those making $200,000 a year or more, which I think is telling. That's according to the New York Times. I just retweeted that.
By
so.
the way, 17%.
Weird coincidence. That's so weird.
17% reporting so far, and Bernie Sanders with an 18-point lead. 18.
Can we see 20?
Can we see 20?
It's been going up. It's gone up 6 points since
Yeah.
6%.
And maybe, I don't know, 18,
I don't think so, but it could.
18's big.
No,
man.
the New York Times has it at 22%, and
Really?
Wow.
and no, at 22% and nearly 19%, 18 points.
I don't know, and that perception of like, 13, that's a nice solid win. 18 or 20% is kind of a gigantic win.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that makes a difference. We'll see.